So, how has the pandemic affected your business and everyday life?
We're jumping right into that, huh? So, by the pandemic, I'm assuming that you mean this COVID situation?
Yes.
Well, just to give a overview is that I have been in this industry for more than 10 years at this point, and in February of 2020, my landlord at the time asked me if I wanted to expand my lease to include a couple of extra floors of healing space. And at the time, I really struggled with the decision, finally coming to the decision that yes, I was going to go ahead and do that. We did the renovations, and I collected together a bunch of people, other practitioners, to join us. We were going to have a movement studio where Mike, my beautiful husband and director, was going to teach Qigong classes. We had a couple of yoga instructors, a childbirth instructor, um, somebody who is doing sound healing, etc. And spent all this money on flooring and renovations, etc. And we went away at the end of February, came back first week of March. The space was almost complete, and then we shut down. And we were being in New York, and right outside of New York City, our area was really probably one of the hardest hit in the US, if not the hardest hit. And people just were completely shut down and shut in. And even once we were able to reopen in August of 2020, business still was pretty slow. We had to completely pivot the idea of having an in-person movement studio because it's a small enough space that if we had to do distancing, etc., we would only be able to have like 3 people in person, and that just wasn't making financial sense to us. So, long story short, we ended up pivoting and making that into a retail shop. I figured that during a pandemic, people would want preventative and holistic wellness services more than ever. While that was the case in terms of massage, people were really starved for touch and in very much of an overwhelmed situation from all of the fear that the pandemic and the media surrounding the pandemic had created. Massage is the only thing that you really can't do virtually. So we took every step to make it as safe and comfortable as possible for people to return to the treatment rooms. We put in HEPA filters and vinyl coverings for the massage table and the face cradle, so everything could be fully sanitized and wiped down. We instituted a policy where people had to wait in their cars and there was no hanging out in the lobby. I stopped doing, beverage service where I wasn't handing out glasses of water to people, and it's kind of sucky also because environmentally I loved giving glasses of water to people rather than bottles of water, and then I went back to individual bottles of water because people felt safer like that. So with regards to massage clients, I felt like they, for the most part, were more than ready to come back, and I had a wait list of a ton of people when we were coming back. In terms of numbers, though, the 3 or 4 months that we were completely shut down, we obviously lost, a ton of money. And I, for one, who is somebody that loves helping people and finds that my business and what I do is really what defined me as a person. I had really an existential crisis during the shutdown and was very upset about the fact that I could possibly lose my business, not knowing how long the thing was going to go on and if people were even going to ever feel comfortable coming back. I still have some clients that have not come back at all. They just still don't feel comfortable after 2 years. I ended up getting PPP loans that helped to keep the business afloat because unfortunately my landlord at the time was not too compassionate and still had us continuing to pay rent even though we couldn't even physically like go into the building. So I needed a way to keep it afloat in that way. And my rent, as I had explained before, when I decided to expand the business, had more than doubled. And I did that with the consideration that all those people that I had mentioned before, the yoga instructor and the sound healer and all those people were going to be on board helping to support that increase in rent, and none of those people came back. They all decided that it wasn't the best choice for them. So that really was hard, and it was difficult to make the decision to go on at that point, but I am a fighter, and I just kept digging my heels in and saying, I'm going to make it work, I'm going to make it work. And the loans did for sure help to keep us afloat for a while. But now I feel like in terms of the service-based businesses, that everything is almost back to where pre-pandemic levels. I recently hired a couple of other therapists, an acupuncturist, and 2 other massage therapists. So now we have 4 massage therapists. So I feel like we're starting to see things returning back to the positives in terms of business at this point.
Do you feel like there's been any hidden agendas behind the pandemic?
Well, I don't know what you would consider the main agenda to be, or I suppose the question would be, would there be any agenda at all? Because supposedly it's just a pandemic, right? So let's just assume that it happened naturally and that it wasn't created in a lab or any type of purposefully. Let's just assume that nobody would do such a horrendous thing and that it just happened naturally. So there are a couple of things at play here. One is that our healthcare system, which I believe is a sick care system and not a healthcare system in our present day society, is and has been since I was a child, since the 70s, very antibiotic and anti-germ in general happy. So I know from raising my kids who were born in the early 90s, mid 90s, late early 2000s, is that if they had a cold, doctors would try to give them antibiotics. There are antibiotic soaps out there on the market, even at Bath and Body Works, which is like, not even a medical store. Everything has antibiotics in it. The hand sanitizer, antibiotic. The problem with that is that it has created an environment of superbugs, and superbugs are very hard to kill with antibiotics now. And so many experts had predicted that there would be a time that there would be these viruses that are going to be very hard to kill. And mind you, that viruses can't be killed with antibiotics. It just creates an environment where things can get harder to kill, let's just say. I'm not a doctor. I am not a pharmacologist. I am not an immunologist. I don't have a lot of specific information on this. I'm just going by what I have read and what I know on a general basis. So let's just say that the environment was ripe for a pandemic, and I do believe that this isn't the only one that we're going to see, and that's what the experts have said too. So all that being said, let's rewind to what I said about it not being a healthcare system and being a sick care system. The CDC, the FDA, and our government, as well as other governments, have allowed big pharma to take over and to really dictate what drugs are safe and what drugs are not safe. what diseases will be cured and what will not be. It is hypothesized that cancer could have been cured 100 years ago, but that information has been suppressed because of the industry surrounding the cancer care in our society is so lucrative that people don't want it to be cured. The same thing can go with the diet industry. And if you look on, I think it was even on HBO, there have been a couple of documentaries about Big Pharma, Purdue in particular, about the OxyContin epidemic in our country, and how that was just allowed to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, which then has created this addiction pandemic in our country that has spiraled out of control. And that was controlled by the FDA, approved by the FDA. The FDA was in the pocket of Big Pharma. The US government has checked off the boxes saying, okay, that drug is safe, and look what happens. So that's just one example of how our system is not designed for health. It's designed to keep people unwell. It's designed to keep people in the pocket of Big Pharma, in the pocket of anybody in that industry that is making money off of keeping us sick. So you combine that with something that is now a highly contagious virus in an environment where people are watching media 24/7 on our tiny computers that we carry around in our pockets now, and our smartphones, not to mention the news on the radio, the news on the TV, the news in the newspapers and magazines. So we are then bombarded with all of this information. And of course, when something like this happens, like when we had Ebola and when we had the swine flu, all of this became such a fear, and fear sells. And I know you and I have talked about that a lot. If you even talking not about pandemics, if you watch just the teasers for the evening news, which I haven't in years and years, but when my kids were little, I kind of fed into it, and they'd say, a shocking expose on what can happen to your child in first grade. Watch at 6. And then everybody's like, oh my God, what could happen to my child in first grade? I need to watch at 6. That is fear-based, and that is what sells. That's what people are like, I have to tune in and see what's going on. So you combine that with the bombardment of information, whether you're on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or possibly all of them, which everybody is, you're hearing all of these stories and you're seeing imagery from different countries all over the world, and it's all at once. Our nervous systems are designed to, if you think back to when we didn't have technology and we were living possibly in structures outside or even an internal structure where we didn't have high-powered transportation, we would get news from villages once a month or so when somebody would travel from another village and say, hey, this was what's going on over here, and then we were able to process that. But we were really only designed to have a very small version of information. So our human brains and our human physiology has not evolved nearly as quickly as the technology has. So our primitive brains, because our brains are still very primitive in terms of an evolutionary scale, that we are living in this contrast of a highly evolved technology and a not very evolved nervous system. So what happens to our nervous system? And that's something that's very important to look at, is that we have two parts of our nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. That is very important for, again, when we're living in that hunter-gatherer society, we might be living outside in the elements. If a lion or a tiger or, even a wolf or a coyote was coming towards us and we needed to fight, that our adrenaline is released. All of the blood runs to your limbs, your arms and legs, so you can flee or fight. That's what our nervous systems are doing now. That same fear is in our bodies. Those same chemicals are being released as if we were in a fight or flight situation in which we really needed to fight or get out, right? But we don't need to fight or get out. There's nothing to fight except for this information. So then our nervous systems are going into this overwhelm. We don't have the blood in our digestive system. Our immune system shuts down. Our digestive system shuts down. Your rational thinking brain shuts down too, because all of that is just instinct and action. On the other hand, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. That is the rest and digest. And that is where your body does its best healing. That is where your digestive system starts to work properly. So to go back to being in the fight or flight, to the sympathetic nervous system, when you're in this fear, your immune system is not working properly. Your rational thinking brain is not thinking properly. You're not able to fight off threats in terms of viruses or bugs or anything like that. Yes, you could fight an animal if it came into your presence, but you might find yourself more jumpy. If somebody taps you on the shoulder, you're jumping 10 feet in the air, or that your digestive system isn't working that well. You're not able to digest food. You're gassy or bloated or constipated. And you might find your brain is just running because you're not thinking clearly, because the blood is rushing to your limbs. So as a body worker, I think the coolest thing is when I'm doing a relaxation treatment, whether it's energy work or massage therapy, and somebody's stomach starts to gurgle. And they're like, "Ooh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I ate lunch, I don't know what that's about." I said, that's your parasympathetic nervous system kicking in. Your body is finally relaxed enough to say, "Oh, I can send the blood to my digestive system now to digest, because I'm not experiencing a threat." So here we are when we're constantly in this fight or flight. We're not able to do any of these things properly, and your body is not working as optimally. I truly believe that our bodies are self-healing mechanisms. They are miraculous. Some of it science has been able to prove and explain, and some of it can't. Like if you cut yourself like I did the other day, you don't have to tell your finger to heal. You don't need to really even do anything. It just self-heals. Same thing happens if you have something going on in your body. If you are in that state of parasympathetic nervous system where everything is running as it should be, in a more relaxed state, in a state that's not perceiving a threat, you can heal. You can fight off a virus. You can fight off a cold. You can fight off a wound that you have. It will heal. If you are in that fight or flight, in that more state where your system is perceiving a threat, it's much more difficult to fight off those threats. So putting those things together, you can see how the fear, the extra information caused our collective to be in this state of where we were all perceiving threats and then not able to fight off the viruses as well.
Have you witnessed anything positive or good come out of the situation?
I can't remember what the expression was, but I was so optimistic. A couple of weeks into the shutdown, the worldwide shutdown, I was feeling very optimistic, and we began to see nature responding in a positive way. Animals that didn't feel safe coming into environments because of people being overpopulated, etc., started to, tipping their ways in, and the waters were clearer, and it just obviously being by New York City was like a ghost town. Nobody was out, so it did give nature a chance to heal as well. And then some of the positives that happened in a general sense, I feel like people who might not have spent a lot of time with their families were kind of forced to spend time with their families. So I feel like, and the animals definitely benefited. We do animal rescue with a dog rescue with an animal rescue, and so many dogs that might not have otherwise had homes got adopted in those 2 years, and that was a definite positive. So wonderful to see people spending more time with their animals and their families and adopting more doggies and cats and etc. For me personally, I think all of the pivots that happened turned out for the best. I mean, they're still evolving, but the fact that we did get to spend more time with our daughter was really a positive, even though she was stressed out, and it sucked for her because she was a senior in high school and she didn't get to have her normal prom or graduation and that type of thing. And then Mike, my husband, was furloughed from his job, and we decided that it just wasn't the right environment for him to come back, and he's been working full-time, and we've been working together full-time now, and it's been really great. And we actually joke that we created this by saying that wouldn't it be cool if we could work together, and I wish we could spend more time together. And so that's been a definite positive that's come from it. And I feel like just people in our industry, at least, getting a little bit more credit for preventative health, and people seeking out the stress relief and knowing even more so how important it is, are beginning to see that people are becoming more empathetic, more considerate of other people, more aware of the fact that we are all connected, and what happens over there also happens here. It's not us versus them. Then there are the people that have let the fear really rule them, and then we've seen more violence and more road rage, and to realize that the people that are reacting in that way, that is a fear-based reaction, and having some compassion for them in that, because a lot of people really took a hit during this time.